So this rabbi was asked, what are the most common topics that people like him to lecture about? And he said, undoubtedly, number one is why do the righteous suffer? And number two, relationships. And then he said, the truth is, it's the same topic. So I WhatsApped a couple of people to come here tonight. And one guy who I sent a message to, he said, Rabbi, there's nothing you or Chevy can tell me that will alter my marriage. So tonight we hope to share with you at least one thing that you'll find useful. So this guy is reading a copy of a very chauvinistic book called Man of the House. And he storms home and he tells his wife, from now on, I am the boss. My word is the final word. You're going to cook me a delicious dinner tonight, a scrumptious dessert, and when I'm done, you're going to prepare a nice bath for me so I can relax. And after my bath, guess who's going to dress me and comb my hair? She looks at him and she says, the Chevra Kadisha. When it comes to marriage, how is it that we are clueless? This guy in my office last week, he says to me, Rabbi, I'm extremely successful, I'm very wealthy, I know how to design, I know how to build buildings, I know how to negotiate, I'm a master at all that, and I've made a lot of money. But I have no idea how to get along with my spouse. And I just got divorced a couple of months ago. Our generation, we can build cars, we can build airplanes, we can go on Facebook, we know everything about the iPhones, the Androids, technology, professors. But put a man and a woman in a room together and have no idea how to get along. This is fact. Every third marriage in America, probably much more than that, ends up in divorce. Take a 13-year-old kid today, and he knows more than most of our grandmothers, and he probably has more experience as well. And yet, you put the man and the woman together in a room, and we are clueless. You know, somebody asked a woman once, how's your marriage? She said, before my marriage, I was incomplete. Now, after my wedding, I'm finished. And it's not necessarily because of in-laws. You know, the wife, she says to her spouse, to her husband, she says, very soon we're going to be 3 in the family. He says, I'm so excited, that's amazing. 3 in the family. It's very exciting. She says, I'm so happy that you are so overjoyed because tomorrow morning, my mother's coming to live with us. And divorce is considered one of the saddest moments. The altar, the Mizbeach, sheds tears. The altar sheds tears. You know, the guy comes to the rabbi, he said, I want to get divorced. The rabbi says, you can't do that, it's very sad. The altar itself is going to shed tears. So the guy says to the rabbi, if the altar wants to shed tears, that's his problem. I want to celebrate with joy. This guy tells his wife, he says, honey, what do you want for your anniversary? For your birthday, I'm sorry, do you want a diamond bracelet or a tour around the world? She says to him, I was thinking I want a divorce. So he says, I wasn't planning on spending that much. So they say love is a dream and marriage is the alarm clock. I'm going to pass the next phase on to Chevy.
Okay, so tonight,
all the jokes.
I'll WhatsApp them to you. So tonight I would like to share with you what the Torah tells us about relationships and specifically intimacy with a spouse. So the Torah, which is, we look at the Torah as something archaic, is actually so fresh, so brilliant, and so valuable for us in 2016 and also going into the new year 2017. But first, I'm going to preface and just tell you that in general, many religions look at intimacy as something very negative and very not holy. And they say in order to be intimate, you need to disengage from holiness. So a young monk arrives in the monastery and he is assigned the position of kind of copying over the canons and laws of the church by hand. And he's, taking this job seriously. He's just entered into the monastery and he's writing. To me, he realizes something off about this. So he goes to see the head. He goes to see the head monk, and he tells him, something doesn't make sense. I'm sitting here copying over these laws, but we're copying it from a copy that someone else copied from a different copy. And why aren't we copying it from the originals? So the head monk thinks about this and he says, listen, we have been doing this for years and it's worked, but you make a very valuable point. Let me go and check in our archives to see, to compare the two notes. So he goes down into the deep, dark dungeon basement of the church, the monastery, and he's there for quite a while. So the young monk is like, I should probably go check on the head monk and see what's going on, because it's been a little bit of time since I left him. So he goes down into the basement, and he suddenly hears this wailing and these cries coming from the dungeons, the basement, and he's crying, and the monk is crying, and he's saying, we missed the letter, we missed the letter. And he's banging his head on the wall, and he's wailing, and the young monk comes down, and he says, is everything okay? And he sees the monk has bloodied foreheads, and he's bruised all over, and he's crying, we missed the letter, and we missed the letter. And he says, what's wrong, Father? What do you mean you missed the letter? And he says, the word is celebrate. To be Jewish is a way of life. We are told that the holiest place was where, in the Bet HaMikdash, was where the Kruvim, they were a male and female-like figure, and they would turn toward one another when the Jews were going through good times, when marriages were happy. And it's actually told that when there was a divorce, they would turn away from one another. That's how deeply affected a divorce is, according to the Torah. And when the Jews were going into Jerusalem, which was such a happy occasion, such a happy time, the male and the female figures were intertwined with one another. They were hugging one another. And when the Romans saw this, they laughed and scoffed and said, what is going on? This is your religion? Intimacy and the male and the female, like that's your religion? And the Romans have a whole different way of looking at intimacy. And a lot of the world, different religions have a very different and often negative way of looking at intimacy in a relationship. But in Judaism, we actually celebrate intimacy. We celebrate it because it's actually holiness. Intimacy is holy. So the Hebrew word, we have some Israelis in the house. So the Hebrew word for man is ish, aleph, yud, shin. And the Hebrew word for woman is isha, aleph, shin, hey, which both the ish and isha actually share two of the same letters, which is the aleph and the shin, which make esh, which actually means fire. So when they have the yud and the hey, which makes the word ish and isha, which is actually the yud and hey, are from the name of God. When we bring God down into this relationship and we bring him into our marriage, then we're not left with just fire. We actually bring the holiness into our relationship. Then we're going to have a peaceful relationship, an intimacy that is holy, an intimacy that is healthy and strong. When we don't have God in this relationship, there's lots of sparks, there's fireworks, and not necessarily the good type. There's a lot of fire. So, if intimacy is so holy and so relevant and so necessary for a relationship, why is it that we have so many rules that control this dynamic of the couple? And so I'm going to just start by telling you that there's one organ that a male has that if you starve him, you satiate him, and if you feed him, you starve him. Which doesn't really make sense, because everything in the world, when you feed it, you're automatically satiating it. So what does this mean
to a relationship. So, for example, anything that requires, a lot of different things to happen, for example, flying or driving a car, in order for it to work effectively, there are lots and lots and lots of rules. And not just rules, there are books, there are lessons you have to go to, there are required testings. There are so many things that have to happen before you are actually the driver of a car, like just a simple car. And yet there's huge rules that go together. In order for you to drive that car, there are rules that have to be in place in order for it to work and for it to be effective, because it's so powerful and so strong and does such incredible things. Airplanes, they go from different places, they fly huge, long distances. They need rules. And how much more so that a couple in a relationship, in intimacy, it's so powerful. It's so powerful what they could have and what they do have. And intimacy is a laser beam. If it's not controlled, it is everywhere. It's exploding. But when it's controlled and it's focused in with the rules of what the Torah actually guides us, then automatically the relationship is powerful. There's power attached to it. There's strength. It's like holding something in your hand that's tremendous and powerful, like a nuclear bomb, something that can be detrimental. That is what it's like. Intimacy is something that, in the wrong hands could do terrible things, or in the wrong situation, the wrong times. But when it's used in the right way, it could be the most powerful and amazing thing for a couple in a relationship. So if you let your intimacy do everything, when you want, how you want, and with who you want, then you will never satiate yourselves. You will always be hungry. So, having said all that, intimacy has some rules. In order to appreciate the strength of a relationship, these are some of the rules that we'll highlight today. So, unrestrained, it will make you starve. So, it has to be in a marriage, and it has to be with one person. Intimacy has to be when you love one another. So when you're fighting or in a very heavy disagreement, not something small, but something that's really powerful, it's appropriate that before you're intimate with one another, that you come to a good understanding in a good relationship. It should be preceded by moments of tenderness, of love, of respect, and care. Because intimacy, when it's used properly, it's not just a physical experience, it actually connects a couple with one another. That is also why intimacy is discouraged when one spouse is drunk or sleeping. And then there are a few other things, like one may not be these are just logistical rules. One may not be intimate while thinking about another woman, a man while thinking about another woman. And then it ideally should be in a darkened place, should be focused on the two of you who are together, connecting in a very physical as well as a spiritual way. Want to do the next one? Okay. And tonight, I'm going to give the rabbi the floor to talk about the reasons for keeping the laws of mikveh.
So tonight we're going to present 4 reasons for the mitzvah of taharat hamishpacha. Now I want to stress before we start that these 4 reasons, the reason why we keep taharat hamishpacha, the laws of family purity, which is mikveh, is because God said so. There's eternal wisdom, tremendous logic and understanding in why we do it, but first and foremost because God commanded, and here are some of the reasons. Number 1, first of all, what is the laws of purity without getting into the nitty-gritty details? What it means is when a woman has her cycle, so if it's 5 days or 6 days or 7 days, so for that amount of time, there's no relationship happening, no intimacy between the husband and wife, and she counts 7 days afterwards. So it's around 2 weeks. 2 weeks of the month off, 2 weeks of the month on. And when I mean off, ideally, okay, I don't want to scare anybody, but ideally, it's not just no intimacy, it's no touching, no kissing, no hugging, and a whole lot of other laws, which if you want, I'll tell you later, but that's the basics. So why do we do this? When a couple first gets married, they are madly in love. It's very easy to identify and to spot a couple who are fresh. You know, before marriage, a guy's walking with a girl and she slips and he says to her, "Are you okay, my darling, my love, my sweet angel?" 10 years after the marriage, she's walking in the same ditch. She slips in the same place. And he says, "Come on, man, move." You know, for the 40th anniversary of this guy, the poor guy forgot to buy his wife a gift. So his wife asks him, "Did you buy me anything?" And he says to her, "My emotions are so deep that I couldn't express it in a gift." Sounds familiar to some of the men? So she looks at him in a way a woman knows how to look at a man. And he says to her, "Did you buy me a gift?" She says, "Yes, I bought you a grave." He says to her, "Why a grave?" She says, "Because deep down, you're good." Took you a while to get that one, right? You know, this guy, for his 30th anniversary, he tells his friends he's going to take his wife to Australia. They're going to tour New Zealand. So he describes in detail what he's going to do. It's going to be amazing. So his friend asked him, "What are you going to do for the 40th anniversary? You know, the 30th, you're going to Australia." He says, "For the 40th, I'll go pick her up." So we want to keep the freshness in the marriage. We want the marriage to be passionate, to be vibrant. So the Torah says, let's keep the laws of family purity, because what that does is creates a yearning, an anticipation. When the husband hasn't been with his wife, when the wife hasn't been with her husband for 2 weeks, believe it or not, they're actually excited to be one with the other. So that same freshness that you were yearning, that you were looking forward, anticipating your wife on her wedding day or the first time you met, that is what the Torah wants to recreate, that passion, every single month. Yes, until your 50th anniversary, that will be present eternally. But there's something deeper as well. The Talmud says that the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is very powerful. You know, you just look at the statistics of infidelity anywhere in the world. I think Jackie Mason was the one who said that 80% of Americans are cheating on their spouses and the other 20% are doing it in Europe. You know, this Catholic community, they had this priest. Whenever they would go to the priest, they would confess. So most of the confession, "I committed adultery, I committed adultery, I committed adultery," and the poor priest is hearing the whole day, "Adultery, adultery, adultery." He says on the Sunday or whatever they have church, he says, "You know, enough with adultery. Please use the word fallen instead. I can't hear the word adultery. Use the word fallen." So from then on, everybody comes to say, "I fell, and that's how things go. Everybody's falling." Anyway, the old priest dies, and a new priest comes to town, and he's sitting in confession, and people are starting to tell him they're falling, and he's getting very nervous, so he convenes a meeting with a mayor in town. He says, "Mr. Mayor, we have a big problem." The mayor looks at him, "What's the problem?" He says, "We have a problem with the sidewalks. We need to fix them. Everybody is falling." And the mayor at first, he looks at him and he doesn't understand what he's talking about. The sidewalks are fine. What's the problem? Until he realizes what the priest is talking about. The guy has no clue that fallen means adultery. And he starts laughing and laughing and laughing. And the young priest looks at him and he says, "You know, Mr. Mayor, I don't quite find this funny. Everybody's falling. This is a very serious thing. In fact, your own wife fell 3 times this week." So the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, has a very special craving for something that is forbidden. In Mishlei, in Proverbs, it says, "Maim gnuvim yimteku." Something which is stolen, so to speak, something which is not allowed. That's what I want. Just look at Adam and the tree of knowledge. Adam was put in the Garden of Eden, and God told him, "You can do what you want, when you want, how you want, eat what you want, pleasure. There's only one thing I'm telling you can't do. One tree in the corner over there, one tree you can't touch. It took Adam no more than 3 hours to sin. He didn't even have a chance to taste from the permissible fruits, because the evil inclination is strong with something that is forbidden. You talk about infidelity, so the phone. Everybody's on their phone the whole day. Everybody's on their phone, the iPhone, the Galaxy. And everybody needs to be connected to Wi-Fi. So the other day, there's this guy in the cemetery, and there's a rabbi in front of him, and he says to the rabbi, "What's the Wi-Fi password?" He's got it in his airplane, he's got the Wi-Fi, he's got it in his house. Everybody goes traveling. What's the password in the cemetery? So the rabbi admonishes him. He says, "Have some respect for the dead." And the guy says, "Thank you, Rabbi. Is that all lowercase?" So this hardworking woman, she's a wonderful wife. And this genie meets her, and he says to her, "I'll give you 3 wishes. What do you want?" So she says, wish number 1 is that my husband will have eyes only for me. And the genie thinks, oh my goodness, I know your husband. Eyes only for you? That's like supremely difficult. What's wish number 2? So she says, wish number 2 is that I will be the most important thing in my husband's life. And she says, the genie says, oh my goodness, that's like beyond impossible. What's your 3rd wish? She says, my 3rd wish is that when my husband wakes up in the morning, the first 45 minutes, his attention shall be only on me. And the genie thinks, so number 1, you want eyes only for you. You should be the most important thing in his life. And number 3, first 45 minutes, I'll see what I could do. Thinks. Boom. Transforms her into an iPhone 7. So, this is why affairs happen, emotional affairs, physical affairs, because there's a craving for something that is forbidden. And what this mitzvah of Taharat HaMishpacha, of 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, causes by default, is that when you see your spouse, your husband or your wife forbidden for 2 weeks, so that kind of a little bit calms down the evil inclination that intends burning for something else. Because the guy's own wife is forbidden. So he has to wait 2 weeks. He's expecting her. He wants her. He loves it. He's yearning for it. He's excited about it. So that also sees, obviously there's no full proof for infidelity, right? But this is just a little bit, tiny little bit of help. It says, never trust yourself. Al ta'amin ba'atzmecha. Never trust yourself. There was in Naharda, the Talmud tells the story, in Naharda, there was a group of women who were captured, and they were redeemed by the local communities. They were thinking, where are we going to put them? So they put them in the rabbi, Reb Amram, who was known as Reb Amram the Pious. They put them in his house on the 2nd floor in the attic. And there was a very, very heavy ladder over there, which required a couple of people together to put it, and they removed the ladder so the women are kind of stuck over there. Nobody can touch them, because they were very vulnerable. The community helped them. So they figured they were safe there. Anyway, the Talmud says that this guy, Reb Amram, the scholar, a genius, a Talmud Chacham, the pious, he is walking in his house, and he sees a woman over there, and he has a tremendous yearning for her. So it says, when you have this ta'ava, this desire, it's like an adrenaline inside of you. So he was able to take the ladder by himself and put it right over there. And he's climbing halfway. And he realizes, what's going on. So he starts screaming. He says, there's a fire burning in my house. Help, help. And it says all the rabbis come over to help him. And when they came, they were like, what fire? There's no fire. He says, not a physical fire, fire in my heart, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. And he said, I'd rather be embarrassed in this world than shamed in the world to come. So that's how he was able to control his Yetzer Hara. The point being that Yetzer Hara is so strong, is so powerful, and nothing's foolproof, but we have to try what we can. And that's, by the way, how the laws of yichud, of seclusion, were introduced. Without getting into all the details, but that's why it's very important that a husband and a wife be together and not be secluded with another. A man shouldn't be secluded with another woman. In the office, it's very important that there should be boundaries set up between a husband and wife. A man's not allowed to be by himself with a woman, and all those laws of yichud, just to calm this thing down. So reason number one, to sum up, why the Torah institutes the laws of 2 weeks yes, 2 weeks no, is first of all to create that freshness in the marriage. And number two, that helps us calm down the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, just a little bit. Reason number two. The Torah wants that the connection between the husband and wife won't only be physical. Meaning, when you're not allowed to be with your spouse for 2 weeks, it forces you to look beyond the physical attraction. Your spouse, your wife, your husband is not an object of your pleasure. And I'll explain what I mean. How do we get to real love? You know, there was a seminar which a woman went to, how to enjoy a relationship with your husband. So the women were asked of there to raise their hands. How many women here love their husbands? And everybody raises their hand. I love my husband. So the guy said, let's do an experiment. Everybody take out your cell phones and text to your husband, I love you, baby. They all did this. They all texted, I love you, baby. Then the presenter said, now take your cell phone, switch it with your friend, and let's read the messages coming up. And here were the responses of the text messages. Number one, husband number one, who is this? Husband number two, are you sick? Number three, now what? What happened to the car again? Number four, I don't understand. Number five, what have you done now? I will not forgive you. Number six, question mark, exclamation mark. Number seven, don't go round and round, tell me how much you need. Number eight, am I dreaming, question mark. Number nine, if you don't tell me who this is meant for, somebody's going to die. I asked you not to drink anymore. Number 12, whatever you want, the answer is no. Number 13, probably the best one, are you okay, question mark. Number 14, forget about it, we're not going to your parents for Shabbat. So, the Torah wants us to get to that true moment where I love you means I love you. How do we do that? A woman, is not an object of your sexual desires. That's not what she is. There's something called lust, and there's something called love. Let me explain. King Solomon said, in one place he says, Matzah isha, matzah tov. Find a woman, you find good. In another place he says, Motzeh ani mar mimavet et ha'isha. I find a woman to be more bitter than death. So which one is it? Oh, when you have 1,000 wives, so you have some like this, some like that, right? But King Solomon wrote this wisdom for every single one of us. So what is it? So the Talmud says when a man used to get married, so the morning after his wedding, they asked him, Nu, motzeh or matzah? Which one is it by you? Motzeh, which is bitter than death, or matzah, which is a great marriage? You know, this man, his husband has a checkup. And the doctor realizes that something's seriously wrong, so he decides to tell the results to his wife. He calls in the wife and he says, listen, your husband is very, very sick. And here's what you need to do. You need to feed him a sumptuous hot meal 3 times a day. You need to make sure not to nag him, not to stress him out. Anything that stresses him could kill him. Make sure he doesn't do any jobs around the house. Make sure he doesn't cook, he doesn't clean, he's relaxed. Let him stay focused all the time. He needs to be very tranquil and calm. Then he'll live. So the husband meets the wife afterwards and he says to her, "Nu, what did the doctor say?" The wife answers, "The doctor said you're going to die." So this husband carries the photo. The husband sees his wife carrying a photo of him in her purse, in her handbag. So he sees this picture in her handbag. He says, "This is amazing. This is like you feel so romantic. You have a picture of me in your handbag. This is incredible." So why do you carry it? She says to him, "I look at this picture and any problem I have disappears." And he's like, "Wow, that's amazing. Tell me, how does this work exactly?" So she says, "I see your picture. Maybe having a very, very serious problem in work, with the kids, with anything. I take the picture, I stare at it. And whatever problem I has is nothing compared to this one." So, motze ani. If the I is involved, if your relationship is about yourself, if your relationship is about what can I get from this marriage, then it's mar mimavet, then it's not going to last. If it's ego-based, if it's lust, it cannot last. See, a baby is born with its fists clenched, signifying, "I'm going to conquer the world, I'm going to become rich, I'm going to become famous." The person dies, by the way, with his palms outstretched like this, signifying, "I'm taking nothing to the grave." We live our lives and we want everything for ourselves. Give a child a toy to play with, and the hardest thing for him or her to do is to share it with his siblings or with his friends, because life evolves around me. So as a person grows up, it's iPods, it's iPhones, iPads, all about the I. We go to school, elementary school, high school, college, and it's very hard to share our lunches. When we were kids, it was very cute. But when you're old, and you go to college, and you grow up, and you have money, you make a living, and you have a spouse, and you have children, it's sad. So we think, we get a house. I bought a car. It's great. But I replace it every couple of years. The house, I move, I'm not married to the house. And we start thinking about a spouse in the same way. It's replaceable. Because you haven't married a spouse. You've brought the spouse into your life. It's about, what can I derive from this relationship? And as long as it's what can I derive, it's doomed. This is the difference between lust and love. I tell the story a lot because it's so pertinent. A guy comes into a restaurant, the fanciest restaurant, fanciest kosher restaurant, whatever that is. And he says to the waiter, "I love fish, give me fish." And the waiter goes to a fish tank. He takes a nice, beautiful, delicious fish swimming over there nicely. He puts it into a pot, boils it, cooks it, peppers it, salts it, brings it to the guy. The guy takes his fork and knife, he cuts the fish, puts it in his mouth, and he says, "I love fish." And the fish is thinking to himself, "I don't wish this kind of love on my worst enemy." Because this is not called "I love you." If you loved me, you would buy me, you would feed me, you would take care of my needs. When a man says to a woman, or a woman says to a man, "I love you," what do they mean? I love you meaning, what can you provide for me? What benefit can I derive from you? If it's a woman, her looks, her companionship. If it's a man, it's also his looks, I guess, his companionship. But if it's all about what can I derive, that's the mistake of "I love you." I love you doesn't mean I love you. I love what you provide for me. That's called lust. There was once a young woman who came to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and said to him, I can't find my shidduch. I'm dating, and I can't find love. So the Rebbe looked at her and says, "You're reading too much romantic novels and watching too many movies. Because the love that you see with a guy and the girl on the beach and everything's wonderful and they're hugging and they're kissing and they're shaking hands, that's not real love. Real love comes from living day in, day out, caring about the other person. Love is a contradiction. The more you give, that's how you get. That's why we know how to do everything. We can build buildings. We could build towers. We could do Facebook and Twitter and everything. But we don't understand that love, that marriage, that a spouse, a relationship works in an opposite way. Those same tools that you use to buy your buildings and to make a lot of money, you needed your ego involved. In fact, the more ego that was involved, the greater it was. Obviously, you need Hashem's blessing. But in a relationship, it's exactly the opposite. You want to receive love. You want to get love. You have to give. The more you give of yourself, the more matzah isha matzah tov, the more there's no I involved, the more it's just giving, 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 the more you receive. And that's the contradiction of love, of relationships, of marriage. You know, while on a trip to Israel a couple years ago, so I was with my wife, Chevy, and the kids. And we came back and we realized that Chevy's purse, handbag, was lost. In it were all her credit cards, driver's license, and everything else that a woman has in a bag. And I was reminded of the story, should I cancel the credit card? Shouldn't I? Reminded of the story of the guy the thief steals his wife's credit card and he doesn't cancel it because the thief spends less than his wife. But at the back of my mind, I couldn't help thinking, my wife, she's a little careless. How could you lose your purse? How do you lose it? But luckily I didn't say anything, because when these thoughts come to your mind about your spouse, you just keep quiet. So we called Amex to cancel the cards. Anyway, long story short, is that there was a guy in Israel who found her purse. And the place where he found it, he decided, let me knock on the nearest door. He knocked on the nearest apartment in Israel. And by divine providence, it was somebody who knew Vigler, who knew my brother Vigler in Israel. And he made the connection right away. Vigler, he returned the purse to us. But when he found it, when we realized where he found it, I realized without a doubt in my mind that it was me who lost it. Because Chevy wasn't with me when I was in that place. It was just me by myself, no kids. So what was my reaction when I knew that it was me? I said, big deal. I lost it, it was a mistake. Happens. But when my wife lost it, and it was a thought in the back of my mind, remember I didn't say a word, luckily, I thought, she's a little careless. Because by nature, we love ourselves. So when we do something wrong, big deal. But when somebody else does something wrong, even your spouse, it's like, how could they do it? How do you know you're truly in love? When you buy that new car, and it's day number 1 with that Rolls Royce or that BMW, and your wife's driving that car and she smashes it. And you react to her smashing it the way you would react to yourself smashing it, then you're on your way to falling in love. That's what it says in the Talmud, in the Tanakh. It says about Amnon. We all know the story of Amnon. It says Amnon loved his half-sister Tamar. It says he loved her, he loved her, he loved her. He wanted to be with her, but it was his half-sister. And he became sick. So he feigned illness, and basically he said that Tamar is a good cook, I need her to cook. And when she was with him, he basically raped her. And this caused tremendous tragedies in Am Yisrael. Actually, the laws of Yichud, of having boundaries, were instituted because of this. But it says that after he raped her, it says he hated her. The same way he loved her, he hated her. And the question is, what do you mean he hated her? I thought he loved her. He loved her, he loved her, he loved her. He became sick from loving her after he raped her. No, he didn't love her anymore. He hated her. Because he never loved her. It was always about him. About what can he derive, what can he get. It was a lust. It was like loving that fish, not loving her. So as soon as he satiated his own ego, he forgot about her. That's it, it's done. There was a nurse who shared the story about this 80-year-old man who came to her office. And he was in a big rush. 8 a.m., he's a big rush, he has to go. So finally she says to him, tell me, my dear man, where are you running to? He says, I have to eat breakfast with my wife. She says to him, where's your wife? She's in a nursing care. What does she have? She has Alzheimer's. She says, does she know you? No, she doesn't recognize me. She doesn't know me at all. So she says to him, so what's the difference if you're going to be there to feed her and to eat with her, or if somebody else in the facility gives her breakfast? So he looks at the nurse and he says to her, you don't understand. My wife may not recognize me, but I recognize her. And that's why I do it. It's not about her, it's about what I can give. It's not about what can I receive. So the second reason for mikveh, for 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off, is the Torah mandates or creates a situation where your spouse is not just an object of your physical appearance, physical attraction. It's not just lusting for them, it also creates a love for them as well. Because it's not just an object of your sexual attraction. Reason number 3 is what the Torah wants. When you have a fight, so there's something called make-up intimacy. The Torah says, that's good for 2 weeks, but 2 weeks of the month, I want you to communicate. I want you to talk to each other. Communication. You know, there's couples in the middle of a fight, 3 a.m., and this burglar breaks into the house. He points a gun to the head of the wife. And he says to her, I'm going to shoot you. Tell me your name. And the woman's trembling. She says, my name is Elizabeth. And he says to her, Elizabeth, this is your lucky night. My mother's name is Elizabeth. And I'm very close with my mother. I cannot shoot somebody who has the name of my mother. I was about to blow your brains out, but this is your lucky night. He then takes the gun, points it to the husband. He says, tell me your name. And the guy's shivering. He says, I didn't do anything. He says, tell me your name right now. I'm going to blow your brains out. He says, my name is Harry, but they call me Elizabeth. Sometimes it takes a burglar to start communicating and bonding. You know, the son, he asks his dad, is it true? I heard that in ancient China, a man doesn't know his wife until he marries. So the father says to him, that happens everywhere, son, everywhere. So this little boy, he asks his father, how much does it cost to get married? The father says, I don't know, I'm still paying for it. This other guy, he comes home, and as soon as he comes home from work, he plops down on the couch. He says to his wife, give me a beer, it's about to start. No, his wife goes to the fridge, gets him a beer, puts it on the thing. He's watching TV for 15 minutes, drinking his beer. After 15 minutes, his wife, please, give me a beer, it's about to start. And his wife's very cross, very angry now. She goes to the fridge, puts him a beer, slams it down. 15 minutes later, he says, it's starting any second now, please, another beer, it's any second. And she starts screaming at him, you slob, you good for nothing, you sit on the TV, it started, he says to her. The first thing we got to do, if you want to communicate effectively, is realize that there's a major differences between a man and a woman. An average woman speaks, I'm not making this up, it's from the encyclopedia, speaks about 20,000 words a day. An average man speaks about 7,000 words a day. By the way, that's why 84% of domestic violence is a man attacking a woman, not the other way around. Not because he's stronger, but because he's run out of words. So the best time to have an argument is not at night. He has no more words left. Argue with him in the morning, make him angry in the morning, there's a fresh supply of words. One of the main complaints of a woman is that my husband doesn't talk to me enough. And you ask the husband, in therapy or anywhere, ask the husband, you don't talk to your wife? Yeah, I talk to my wife every day. What's she talking about? And you ask the woman, no, he doesn't talk to me. Because the definition of talking to each other is different in a man and in a woman. Ask a husband, why do you talk? And he says, it's a means of expressing information, of saying something. So ask a guy, what did you talk to your wife about? He says, I told her about my bills, I told her about the bank, I told her we have minuses in the bank, I told her who I'm going to kill next week. You know, it's a conversation. Ask a woman, she says we never spoke. Because for a woman, speech is also a way of expressing herself, of connecting, of expressing her emotions. You know the story of the guy, Yankel, he's talking in his sleep for 30 years. 30 years, his wife's lying next to him and hearing his speeches. Finally, one night, he's not just talking, he's giving a sermon in his sleep. And she cannot hack it anymore. She wakes him up violently and she says, Yankel, I cannot take it anymore. For 30 years I hear your sermons at night. He says to her, if you'd only let me talk during the day. So, for a man, speech is just a tool to relay information. For a woman, it's to connect. A guy says to a woman, how was your day? And she'll tell him in the morning, you left. And the washing machine and the dryer had a major leak. And the leak was spilling all over the house. And what's a guy thinking while she's telling him that? Okay, I need to call the plumber, the guy to fix it. How much is that going to cost? He's like making a rapid calculation. And then she continues. And she says, okay, all the floors, all the carpets got watered. It's water damage. So in his mind, okay, there's damage over here. I got to find a guy to clean the carpets. How much is it going to cost? He's already finding a solution to this all. And she's going on for 2 hours about all her problems. And at the end, 5 minutes before the end, she says, so what I did was I called my friend who had a husband who came right over. He fixed the leak, dried the carpet, and everything's fine. And he's like, woman, what are you telling me? Why are you telling me this? For what? Why do I need to know? Because in his mind, speaking is just a way of telling me what needs to be done. But for her, she's bonding with him. It's a different form of communication. Another example is, John and Rebecca are going out. And Rebecca asks John, how do I look? She's all dressed. How do I look? So he answers, fine, let's go. She doesn't want to know, fine, let's go. She wants attention. She wants him to tell her, you're beautiful, you're stunning, that dress, oh my God. That's what she wants. When she says, I have nothing to wear, and she has 65 outfits in her wardrobe, she doesn't mean she has nothing to wear. She just wants you to tell her you look beautiful in the green or the blue or the purple, and she wants you to tell her what she should match, her shoes or blah, whatever, everything. That's what she wants. After 7 days of giving him the silent treatment, and they're not talking, so the guy, he asks his wife, do you know where my shirt is? And she says, oh, you're talking to me? Haven't you noticed? We haven't spoken and we're in a fight? He says, oh, I thought we were just getting along. So just by the way, good practical advice for a husband when you come home. You preempt. You ask your wife, how was your day? I was waiting the whole day to talk to you. What that does is creates that bond already. It's just when you understand the differences between men and women, communication is more effective. One of the major complaints of a woman is the husband never tells me he loves me. So the guy comes to the therapist, the husband and wife, and the wife says, my husband, I don't know if he loves me. So the husband says, the therapist says to the guy, he says, you don't love your wife? Do you love her? He says, of course I do. So why don't you tell her? He says, 28 years ago when we were married, I told her I love her. If anything changes, I'll let her know. Second difference between a man and a woman is as follows. When a man sleeps, 70% of his brain shuts down. no baby crying. Fire can be burning. He won't hear a word, a sound. When a woman is sleeping, 90% of her brain is still active. That's why when a man reads a newspaper, he doesn't hear anything else.
What happens, not to cut you, if it's the opposite?
Where?
If it's the opposite, I'm just telling you encyclopedia facts.
No, but what happens in cases where it's the opposite? What do you
Like what? What do you mean?
Once in a
Well,
million.
you know, it's 90% of the brain still active for the man, and it's 0 function for the woman.
If it's the other way around,
What happens?
then you got a good wife and you should take care of her. You should let her sleep. Continue. You'll live longer. You know, a man's brain is very compartmentalized. He has a filing cabinet for everything in his brain. A filing cabinet for his mother-in-law, filing cabinet for his job, for his employer, for his employees. He has a filing cabinet for his spouse. For everything about him, he has a filing cabinet. A woman, her brain, everything is intermeshed. Everything is together. Everything is a different kind of brain. Everything is one filing cabinet. So that's why a man cannot talk on the phone with background noise. It's impossible. Yeah, everything has to be quiet, and then he's on the phone. A woman, baby screaming, everything's going on. Hello?
The man has a special filing box that he favorites the most. You know what it is?
The nothing box.
The empty box.
The nothing box, yeah. 70% of his brain is a nothing box. You know, when a woman says, I'll be ready in 5 minutes, what does it mean?
5 hours.
It means the same thing that a man says when he's watching his football and he says, I'll take out the trash in 5 minutes. When a woman says, you ask her what's wrong, she says, nothing. What does she mean? She means something. And she means you better be on your toes because I'm about to turn you inside out. When a woman said, go ahead with raised eyebrows, what does she mean? That's a dare. She's daring you. When a woman says, that's okay, what does she mean? This is one of the most dangerous statements that a woman can say. You better be careful. When a woman says, thanks, what does she mean? She's thanking you, that's it. She's just thanking you. But when a woman says, thanks a lot, that's very different. One of the differences between a husband and wife is that one feels bitter towards the other. There's a resentment. So I'll give you an example. There's a way of rewarding points that a husband differs from a wife. So I woke up this morning at 5 a.m. to our baby, Musia, crying. And Chevy tells me, go get her. So I'm very tired. Slept from 11 till 5, that's 6 hours. And I went to get her. And I fed her, and I played with her. I even changed her diaper. So for me, when I grade myself, when a husband grades himself, that's 5,000 points. Afterwards, I went to the synagogue to pray. And I took 2 of my kids with me. So the way I grade myself, that's 1,000 points for each kid. I'm up 7,000 points for the day now. And then I go to work. Today I prepared this lecture, so I was in the office for a couple of hours. So working for a husband, I give myself another 3,000 points. I come home 5 p.m., I'm up 10,000 points for the day. So a husband says to himself, I can relax on the couch. I'm going to watch television. I'm going to go online. I'm going to relax. I'm up 10,000. You, wife, catch up to me. But what a man doesn't realize is, in my case this morning, Chevy was up at 4 a.m. with Musia. And after being with her for an hour, she said, okay, now your turn. When I took 2 kids to the synagogue, remember I have 5 kids, Chevy took the other 3 kids across town to the west side. She came afterwards back here to pick up the other 2 kids, and she was with them most of the day, and she was also working and also doing everything. So the way a woman grades points is as follows. You take Musia in the morning, I take my baby in the morning, she doesn't give you 5,000 points. She gives you 1 point. You then go to work. You can work and work and work and work. You come home with a nice paycheck. You know how many points that's worth? 1. So you got 2 points now. You take the kids, you do this, everything you do, it's 1 point. 3 points. So meantime, she's been gathering much more points. You come home, and she's up for the day. The way the grade system works is very different. Take the classic example, buy a woman a rose. And how many points is that? 1. So a man thinks, okay, a mathematical equation, 1 rose, 1 point. Let me buy her a dozen roses, 12 points. So he goes and buys her 12 roses. Now, how many women here, raise your hand, would you prefer 1 rose every week or 12 roses one time? 12 roses one time or 1 rose a week? 1 rose a week. For a man, how mathematical wrong is that? That doesn't make sense. 1 a week, I have to go out and buy her a rose a week because 12 roses or 1 rose is 1 point. So the good news is, if a man wants to collect points, they're very easy. See, the grading system for a woman, and this is what men don't realize. Men, we do the big gestures. We want to buy her a $50,000 ring and we think we're done for the next 10 years. Bought you a ring. Take her out for a dinner, surprise her. That's like I'm up for the year. But what you don't realize, when you buy that $50,000 ring, that's 1 point. So here's the good news. When you wake up in the morning and your wife is brushing her teeth, you take 30 seconds of your day and you make your bed. That's 1 point. Not just that, when she's still brushing her teeth and you see that pile of socks and underwear and laundry on the corner of your bed being piled up, you take 90 seconds and you clean that up and the woman comes out and it's all gone, that's another point. So the big gestures, the small gestures are all 1 point, 1 point. And this is how you build love. Because what a woman wants more than anything else is to be complimented, to be appreciated. What a man wants is to be respected. When a woman comes home and she says, and her husband says, what's wrong with your finger? She hurt her finger. She wants her husband to make the biggest attention about that. She wants attention. She wants appreciation. She wants compliments. A man wants respect. You know, this woman, she makes a toast to her husband on their 50th anniversary. And she tells everybody, L'chaim, to my husband, our marriage passed like 2 days. So everybody was so impressed, 50 years, and it passed by like 2 days, that's incredible. So there's one nudnik in the crowd, he comes over to her afterwards and he says to her, tell me, you're married for 50 years, which 2 days did your marriage pass like? Like, why not 1 day? She says it passed like 2 days, Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur. First thing we need to do is to realize we are so different. When we realize that we are so different, we understand the differences between us, we'll be able to start communicating one with the other. So reason number 3 of why we keep the laws of family purity is because when you're not able to have intimacy, to be intimate, you are forced to communicate, to talk one with the other. So again, reason number 1 was to keep the freshness in the marriage alive, which helps also with infidelity a little bit. Reason number 2 was that you shouldn't view your spouse as an object of physical attraction. You shouldn't lust him or her. You should love. Reason number 3 is that you'll be able to start communicating. Reason number 4, and this is the final reason, is this is the best and most effective way to bring children into the world. Now, intimacy is not only about bringing children, it's also about giving your spouse pleasure, but it's also about having children. You know the story about the woman, her friends asked her, how were you able to have such a successful marriage over 30 years? So she says, in the beginning of our marriage, I told my husband, the big decisions are yours and the small decisions are mine. He says, what do you mean? How does that work? He says, the big decisions, who President-elect Trump should appoint as his defense secretary and his minister, he's the guy in Israel, that my husband can talk to Trump himself. He doesn't need to talk to me even. I give him my full permission. The big decisions such as whether Israel should attack Iran or not, he could talk to Bibi Netanyahu, doesn't have to consult with me at all. The big decisions like what should America do about Syria, I leave it up to my husband. I don't get involved. That's his side of the marriage. But the small, inconsequential decisions, like how many children should we bring into the world? The small decisions like where should we send our kids to school, that I make. The small decisions about how much money can I put on the credit card per hour, that's my decision. The small decisions about how many shoes I could buy per day, those are my decisions, and my husband doesn't get involved. So keeping mikveh is the most effective way to have children. How does that work? Because the way a woman's body is made up, and without getting into all the biological details, a woman ovulates on day number 12 to 14 of her cycle. Not all women are the same, but more or less 12 to 14 of her cycle. Which means that if a woman observes the laws of family purity, on day number 1 of her cycle, she'll wait 5 to 7 days, and then she'll wait another week, 7 days, before immersing in the mikveh, which means that from day 12 to 14, when she's the most fertile, she's ovulating, that's when they will be intimate together. Not only that, but the man's sperm count will be at its highest then, because he'll be fresh. So to sum up, 4 reasons why the Torah tells us to keep family purity. Again, I want to stress, reason number 1, and the most important one, is because God said so. That's it. But to sum up, reason number 1 is because we want to keep the marriage fresh. Reason number 2, we want to view our spouse not just as a physical attraction, a lust, but also a love. Reason number 3, to be able to communicate, not just to touch. And reason number 4, because this is the best and most effective way to have children. Hope this was useful to some of you tonight. And with that, we end. And any questions, Chevy and I will be glad to answer.